Mom, don't forget to finish the leftovers in the fridge. That single line from my daughter-in-law froze me in place. I stared at the message for a long time, my eyes blurring from tears I refused to let fall. My son and his family were out celebrating his big promotion, dining at a rooftop restaurant where the city lights touched the stars, while I sat alone at home, staring at cold containers of yesterday's food. I replied with one word, okay. Then I placed my phone face down on the table and felt something inside me collapse. My name is Vivian Clark, and I'm 67 years old. 2 years ago, I thought I'd found peace after losing my husband, Robert, to a sudden heart attack. My son, Derek, had said all the right things. Mom, you shouldn't be alone. Move in with us. The kids will love having Grandma around. His wife, Amber, smiled warmly and agreed. Of course, Vivian. Your family. I sold my home, the one Robert and I built over 4 decades, and moved into their house in Portland with 2 suitcases and a heart full of hope. For the first few months, life felt beautiful. I made breakfast for the grandchildren every morning, packed their lunches, and filled the house with the smell of cinnamon toast and laughter. Derek would hug me before work, Amber would thank me for helping, and the children would run into my arms when they got home from school. I thought I'd found comfort again, a second chance at family warmth. But things change quietly at first. Smiles fade. Conversations shorten. Small criticisms begin to replace gratitude. It's never a sudden storm, it's more like a slow frost creeping across a window until the world outside disappears. One day Amber stopped asking about my day. Another, Derek began skipping our morning talks. Before I knew it, their laughter no longer included me. I started to feel like a guest, useful, but unwanted. Every month, I transferred money into their account, helped with the children, cooked, cleaned, and tried not to complain. I told myself this was love, that families help each other. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Still, I held on. Because a mother's heart always hopes her children will remember where they came from. But that night, the night Derek got his promotion, changed everything. Have you ever given everything to your family, only to feel invisible in return? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories that speak straight to the heart. That Tuesday afternoon, Derek came home earlier than usual. I was folding laundry in the living room when the front door burst open and Amber's laughter echoed through the hallway. Derek swept me into a hug before I could even ask what was happening. Mom. I got the promotion. Vice President of Operations. I felt my throat tighten. Oh, sweetheart, your father would be so proud of you. Amber popped a champagne bottle, her smile gleaming. We're celebrating tonight. A real dinner, fancy place downtown with city views and a tasting menu. I clapped my hands together, my heart fluttering like it hadn't in years. That sounds wonderful. I'll make sure the kids are ready early. Amber hesitated, her phone already in her hand. Oh, actually, we've already made the reservation. It's for 6 people. 6? I asked, confused. You, Derek, the kids, who else? She gave a vague smile. Just some colleagues and their spouses. You know how these things go. Something inside me twinged, but I brushed it off. Surely they'd change the reservation. Surely my son wouldn't celebrate such a milestone without me. The rest of the week, I caught fragments of their plans, talk of outfits, the restaurant's rooftop view, the dessert menu. Every time I entered the room, the conversation stopped. Still, I prepared as if I were going. I ironed my navy blue dress, the one Robert used to say made my eyes glow. I polished my pearl earrings. For the first time in months, I put on lipstick. When the day arrived, the house hummed with excitement. The children giggled upstairs as Amber helped them dress. Derek was adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. The scent of Amber's expensive perfume floated through the air. I stood at the top of the stairs, clutching my purse, ready to join them. My heart pounded, half joy, half anxiety. Derek looked up and froze for a moment. Mom, hey. We're just heading out. I'm ready, I said softly, smiling. Amber's expression flickered, her voice suddenly polite. Oh, Vivian, I didn't think you'd want to come. It's more of an adult dinner. My smile faltered. I'd still like to be there. It's your big night, Derek. He cleared his throat. We'll be back late. Don't wait up, okay? The words sank like stones. The sound of car doors followed, then the engine, and finally, silence. I stood alone in my navy blue dress, pearl earrings catching the fading light, and listened to the sound of celebration driving away. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Amber's message, Mom, don't forget to finish the leftovers in the fridge. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. The smell of perfume still lingered in the hallway, proof they'd once been there, laughing, leaving me behind. I typed one word, okay. And for the first time in my life, that word didn't mean acceptance. It meant goodbye. If you were in my place that night, dressed up, waiting, and left behind, what would you have done? Comment below and tell me your answer. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that reveal the hidden strength in every woman's heart. The night felt longer than any I'd ever known. I sat by the window, still in my dress, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Somewhere in the distance, city lights flickered, the same city where my family was celebrating without me. I imagined them laughing over dinner, toasting with champagne, plates of food carried out by smiling servers. My stomach growled, but not from hunger, from emptiness. Hours passed. I finally stood, walked into the kitchen, and opened the refrigerator. Amber's leftovers. A container of spaghetti, hard and clumped together. A half-eaten chicken. A bowl of wilted salad. I stared at them until my chest tightened. Those containers weren't just food. They were symbols, proof of what I'd become, an afterthought. I closed the fridge door and leaned against the counter. My reflection in the window looked tired, older than 67. I whispered, Robert, if you could see me now. I thought about the day I moved in, how Derek promised I'd never be alone, how Amber smiled and said I'd be part of their family. For months, I believed it. I believed I was needed. But slowly, the gratitude had turned into tolerance. Every gesture I made was either corrected or dismissed. I remembered Amber's comments, always polite on the surface, but sharp enough to leave a mark. Vivian, I've got a system for laundry. Mom, maybe let me handle dinner next time, your recipes are a bit heavy. Did you forget to turn the stove off again? Each word, small on its own, but together, they built a wall. Derek had changed too. The son who once called every evening stopped answering unless it was about bills or errands. The man who promised to take care of Mom now only asked if I'd transferred my share of the household expenses. $1,200 every month, automatic. I never questioned it. I just paid, because that's what mothers do. I gave them money. I gave them my time. I gave them my peace. And in return, they gave me leftovers. I sank into the kitchen chair, holding my phone. The text glared at me again. Mom, don't forget to finish the leftovers in the fridge. That line would never leave me. I typed and deleted a dozen replies. Angry ones. Sarcastic ones. Heartbroken ones. But none of them felt right. Finally, I settled for the truth. Okay. I pressed send, placed the phone face down, and let the silence fill the room. For a long time, I didn't move. I just listened to the refrigerator hum, the clock tick, the rain fall. And then I made a decision, quiet, steady, certain. I wasn't going to wait for them to remember my worth. I was going to remind them by leaving. I don't remember how long I sat there in that dark kitchen. Maybe an hour, maybe two. Time didn't move, it just pressed down on me until I could hardly breathe. At some point, I stood and started cleaning, not because the kitchen needed it, but because I needed something to do with my hands. My movements were slow, automatic, washing dishes that were already clean, wiping a counter that didn't need wiping. When I opened the drawer where we kept household papers, a folder caught my eye: expenses. Derek had once told me to keep everything organized. I'd done exactly that. I pulled out the folder and sat at the table. There it was in black and white, my monthly transfers, every single one labeled contribution. 24 payments of $1,200. 2 full years. Almost $30,000. I'd done it without question, trusting that it was fair. Beside the statements was another document, the car purchase receipt. Derek's car. I'd given them $15,000 for a down payment when his old one broke down. He'd called it a loan. No repayment had ever come. I stared at the numbers. My hands trembled, not with anger, but disbelief. It wasn't about the money, it was the realization that they'd accepted it without hesitation. No gratitude. No discussion. No second thought. And suddenly, every memory started clicking into place. The time I baked Tyler's birthday pie, only to watch Amber serve a store-bought cake instead. The weekend I offered to babysit so they could celebrate their anniversary, and later saw pictures online of them at the beach with the children. The day I got sick and asked Derek to bring me some soup, and he told me to order delivery because they were too busy. Each moment alone didn't break me. But together, they painted a truth I could no longer ignore. I wasn't living with my family. I was living with my employers, unpaid, unappreciated, invisible. I pushed the folder aside and opened another, one labeled Future Plans. Inside were printouts of real estate listings. Spacious houses in neighborhoods I couldn't afford even when Robert was alive. 4 bedrooms. Home offices. Game rooms. Not one of them had a space labeled guest suite. Not one. Amber had even made notes in the margins, cheerful comments about open kitchens and how, finally, there'd be room for everyone. Everyone but me. That was the moment my hands stopped shaking. For the first time in months, my thoughts were clear. They were planning a new life, and I wasn't part of it. I looked at my phone, still on the table, and felt the loneliness settle like dust in my lungs. Then, almost without thinking, I scrolled through my contacts until I reached a name I hadn't seen in years: Ruth. My sister. We hadn't spoken since our mother's funeral. Pride had kept us apart. But pride had also trapped me here, in a house where I was treated like a stranger. It was time to let one go to fix the other. I pressed call. The phone rang 4 times. I almost hung up. Then came a hesitant voice. Vivian? For a moment, I couldn't speak. Ruth, it's me. There was silence, not cold, just surprised. It's been a long time. I know. My voice trembled. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. She exhaled softly. Tell me what's going on. And I did. I told her everything: the move, the coldness, the money, the dinner I wasn't invited to, the text about leftovers. I spoke until my throat burned, until there was nothing left to hide. When I finished, Ruth said nothing for a long time. Then her tone changed, steady, protective. Pack your bags, Vivian. You're not staying there another night. Ruth, I can't just. Yes, you can, she interrupted gently. You've done enough. You've given enough. It's time you let someone take care of you for once. Tears stung my eyes. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're my sister. Her voice softened. You gave me a lifetime of forgiveness when I didn't deserve it. Let me return the favor. I'll drive down tomorrow morning. I pressed the phone to my chest for a moment, shaking. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to say those words. After we hung up, I stood in the quiet kitchen and looked around. The clock ticked softly on the wall. The same clock Robert and I had bought for our first house. It had moved with me through every chapter of my life, through joy, loss, and now, this final heartbreak. I took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I would leave this house. But I wouldn't leave defeated. I would leave with my dignity intact. I walked back to my room and opened the closet. My clothes hung neatly, pressed, color-coordinated, untouched by anyone but me. I ran my hand along the fabric, thinking of how much of myself I'd folded away over the years to fit into this home. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo of Robert on the nightstand. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have left sooner. You wouldn't have let anyone treat me this way." The room felt still, almost listening. By midnight, my plan was clear. I'd already checked the train schedules, looked up senior apartments near Ruth's bookstore, and made a list of what to pack first thing in the morning. It wasn't just about leaving a place, it was about reclaiming the woman I used to be. For years, I'd told myself I was lucky to have a roof over my head. But now, I understood something new: safety without respect isn't love. I folded my dress, placed it in the suitcase, and zipped it shut. My decision was final. Tomorrow, my silence would end, not with words, but with absence. The morning light crept through the curtains, thin and cold. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired either. My heart felt steady, calm, like I had finally decided who I was again. I showered, dressed in comfortable clothes, and began folding my life into 3 suitcases. Every motion was deliberate. Each shirt, each photograph, each letter carried a story, proof that I had lived fully, that I mattered. I packed Robert's watch, the pearl earrings I wore the night before, and the photo album of our family vacations. The smiles in those pictures looked like promises no one had kept. By 7, the room looked bare. No trace of the woman who had once believed this house was her sanctuary. From downstairs, I could hear muffled voices, Derek's and Amber's, mixed with the sound of clinking dishes. They were hungover, maybe. Or maybe they simply didn't care enough to check on me. I stood by the window, watching the gray clouds stretch across the sky. A quiet strength settled in my chest. I didn't feel like the broken woman from last night anymore. I felt ready. At 8, Ruth called. "I'm an hour away," she said. "Are you ready, Viv?" "Yes," I replied. "Everything's packed." "Good. When I get there, we'll load the car and go straight home. Don't tell them. You don't owe them an explanation." I smiled softly. "I wrote one anyway." "Of course, you did," Ruth said with a hint of affection. "Make it count." After the call, I checked the house one last time. The children's shoes by the door. The family photos on the wall, none of which included me. It was strange how you could live somewhere for years and still leave without leaving a trace. I walked to the kitchen table, opened my banking app, and took back what was mine. The joint account showed a balance, the same account where I'd been sending $1,200 every month. I withdrew every cent of my deposits, a total of $8,400. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Then, I went to the garage. My boxes were still there, Christmas ornaments, family heirlooms, Robert's tools. I had labeled everything with yellow tape weeks ago, almost as if I knew this day would come. A moving truck pulled up 30 minutes later. 3 polite young men stepped out. "Morning, ma'am. You're moving today?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Everything with yellow tape goes." They worked quickly, respectful and silent. I stood to the side, watching years of my life carried away piece by piece. When the last box was loaded, one of them asked quietly, "New beginning?" I nodded. Yes. A new beginning. As they drove off, I turned back to the empty garage and whispered, "Goodbye." With the moving truck gone, the house felt larger than ever, hollow, almost echoing. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was freedom. I walked back inside and stood in the center of the kitchen. Every corner held memories of work I had done, the meals, the cleaning, the quiet mornings alone. I had built order in this home, but I had never belonged to it. Now, I would leave something behind, not chaos, not revenge, but truth. I started with the small things. The cast iron pan I'd seasoned for 20 years. The Dutch oven Robert had gifted me one Christmas. The spice rack I'd bought myself because the shelves had been bare when I first moved in. All mine. All going with me. The kitchen looked stripped down, but it felt right, like a place returned to its real state, without my invisible labor softening the edges. I took the framed photos I had printed of the children, the ones displayed on the living room shelf. They were my memories, too. The spaces they left behind would speak louder than any confrontation. Then I walked to the garage, Derek's favorite space, the one he always claimed he never had time to fix. 6 months ago, I had spent weeks turning it into something organized and functional. Labeled bins, mounted tools, stacked storage, a place that worked. He had thanked me once, offhandedly, saying, "Wow, Mom, you didn't have to do all this." No, I hadn't. Now, I stood there quietly and began undoing it all. Every label removed. Every box unstacked. Every shelf I had installed taken down. The garage returned to its former mess, cluttered, tangled, unrecognizable. When I finished, I stood back and let out a long breath. It wasn't petty. It was symbolic. I was taking back my energy, my effort, my time. The house would look exactly as it had before I'd touched it, proof of what I had brought into their lives and what they lost when they took it for granted. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. My pen hovered for a long time before I began to write. Each word came slowly but clearly, shaped by 2 years of silence and one night of awakening. When I finished, I folded the paper neatly and placed it under my house key. The note sat in the middle of the table, impossible to miss. I read it once more, then whispered, "This is my goodbye." As I turned to leave, I glanced around the room one last time, not with sorrow, but with relief. I had given them everything. Now, I was taking back the only thing that truly belonged to me, my peace. The sound of tires on gravel broke the silence. I looked through the front window and saw Ruth's little blue car pulling into the driveway. She stepped out wearing her old denim jacket, the same one she used to lend me on cold evenings when we were teenagers. The moment she saw me at the door, her eyes softened. "Viv," she said quietly. "Ruth." For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then she opened her arms, and I walked straight into them. The years we'd spent apart vanished. "You ready?" she whispered. I'd been ready for a long time. Together, we carried the last suitcase to her car. When I closed the trunk, the weight on my chest lifted. Before leaving, I walked back inside one final time. The air felt still, almost waiting. I touched the kitchen table, the smooth surface where I'd left my letter and the house key. It wasn't anger that filled me, just a calm knowing that I had done the right thing. "Goodbye," I said softly to the empty house. As I stepped outside, Ruth held the passenger door open. "Let's go home." We pulled away from the driveway slowly. I didn't look back until the house disappeared in the rearview mirror. Halfway down the highway, my phone began to buzz. Derek's name flashed again and again. I didn't answer. "Not yet." "Are you okay?" Ruth asked. "I'm free," I said simply. "That's enough for today." The road stretched ahead like a promise. For the first time in years, I had no schedule, no obligation, just open space and my own thoughts. Hours later, when Derek and Amber returned from their celebration, the house that once ran like clockwork felt different. The moment they opened the door, they noticed the emptiness, the missing photographs, the bare shelves, the quiet. "Mom?" Derek called. His voice echoed. Amber walked to the kitchen, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. She stopped when she saw the note under the key. Her hand trembled as she unfolded the paper. Derek stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. Neither spoke. The letter listed everything: the money Vivian had contributed, the care she had given, the nights she'd spent alone while they lived their separate lives. It wasn't written in bitterness, it was written in truth. At the bottom, one line stood out. I won't eat leftovers anymore. I deserve a place where love isn't rationed. Amber pressed the paper to her chest, her face pale. Derek turned toward the garage, drawn by instinct. When he opened the door, he froze. The perfect order his mother had built was gone, replaced by the clutter he had ignored for years. He understood then what that space had symbolized: her effort, her patience, her silent love. When he came back inside, his voice was barely a whisper. "What have we done?" Amber said nothing. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator, the one still holding those cold leftovers. The road to Seattle felt endless, but for once, I didn't mind. Every mile between me and that house felt like a layer of weight lifting from my shoulders. Ruth didn't speak much during the drive, and she didn't have to. Sometimes, love is quiet, the kind that simply shows up and waits beside you until you're ready to breathe again. When we arrived at her apartment above the bookstore, the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. She showed me the small guest room she'd prepared. Fresh sheets. A vase of tulips on the nightstand. A photo of our mother smiling from decades ago. "I thought you might like some company," Ruth said softly. I sat on the edge of the bed and ran my hand across the blanket. "It's perfect." That first night, I slept for 12 straight hours. No interruptions. No tension. No sense of walking on eggshells. In the following days, I moved slowly, letting rest settle into my bones. I cooked breakfast for the two of us, watered Ruth's plants, and helped out in her bookstore when she needed an extra pair of hands. The customers were kind, curious people. One afternoon, a man named Frank came in looking for a mystery novel. His smile was shy but warm. We began talking, about books, about losing people, about starting over. He told me he was a retired teacher who'd lost his wife to cancer years earlier. The hardest part, he said, was learning that life doesn't end just because someone you love isn't in it anymore. His words lingered with me long after he left. A week later, he returned, same time, same smile. "I figured I owed you a coffee for listening last time," he said, holding 2 paper cups. I laughed, something I hadn't done freely in a long time. "Only if I get to return the favor next time." It became a quiet ritual, Thursdays at 3. A simple friendship, but one that reminded me I was still capable of connection. Days turned into weeks. I noticed how my voice no longer trembled when I spoke. I began to stand straighter. I even started helping Ruth reorganize the bookstore's reading corner, adding a small sign that said, "Stories for Second Chances." Every time I passed it, I smiled to myself. Because that's what I'd found, a second chance at living, not surviving. And for the first time since Robert's passing, the thought of the future didn't feel heavy. It felt possible. A month after moving to Seattle, I felt ready for a conversation I had been avoiding. Derek had called many times, each one unanswered. But healing also meant closure, and closure couldn't happen in silence forever. So I unblocked his number and sent one simple text. "Meet me this Saturday at 10 a.m. at Bluebird Cafe. Just you and Amber." His reply came almost instantly, "We'll be there." That Saturday morning, I woke early. The sky was washed in soft gray light. I dressed with care, not to impress, but to feel whole. A cream sweater, gray slacks, and my pearl earrings. They had been with me through every chapter of my life. They deserved to be part of this one too. When I entered the cafe, the smell of roasted coffee wrapped around me like a quiet hug. I chose a corner table with a clear view of the door. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing, only ready. Derek and Amber arrived together. They looked nothing like the polished couple from that rooftop dinner night. His eyes were heavy, her face drawn with guilt. They sat down without speaking. For a long moment, there was only the sound of clinking cups and low chatter. Finally, Derek spoke. "Mom, I don't know how to start." "Try with the truth," I said softly. He nodded. "We were selfish. I was selfish. I let Amber do the talking because it was easier than facing how badly I'd hurt you. I took your help, your money, your time, and I called it love because it benefited me. Amber wiped her eyes. I was jealous of you, Vivian. I told myself it was about space and privacy, but really, I felt like I couldn't measure up. The kids adored you. Derek trusted you. Instead of learning from you, I resented you. I turned my insecurity into cruelty. I listened without interrupting. Their words were painful, but honest, the kind of honesty that comes too late but still matters. I understand, I said. But I need you both to hear something. I'm not coming back to live with you. That part of my life is over. Derek's shoulders sank. I figured. I wanted a chance to apologize properly. You did, I said gently. But apology isn't enough. Change is. Amber nodded quickly. We're both in therapy. We're trying to rebuild how we treat each other, and the people we love. That's good, I said. Because forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It just gives you a place to start over. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was understanding. For the first time in years, they were seeing me, not as help, not as a placeholder, but as a person. I reached across the table and took Derek's hand. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I've learned something, love that demands silence isn't love worth keeping. Amber's tears fell freely. Derek squeezed my hand. You're right, Mom. You always were. I smiled faintly. Then let's begin again, this time with honesty. 3 months after that meeting, Derek called again. This time, his tone carried something different, humility. Mom, he said softly, the kids miss you. Can we come to visit? I paused, letting the question linger. You can. But this visit will be on my terms. Of course, he said quickly. We just want to see you. That weekend, their car pulled up in front of Ruth's bookstore. I stood by the window, watching Tyler and Mia tumble out before the engine even stopped. Grandma, they shouted, running toward me. I opened my arms, and they crashed into me with laughter and tears. I breathed in their scent, crayons, shampoo, and childhood. The sound of their joy filled every empty space inside me. Amber followed behind them, holding a casserole dish. I made your pot roast recipe, she said with a nervous smile. I thought, maybe we could share dinner? I looked at her, then at Derek standing a few steps back, his eyes full of hope and regret. I nodded. I'd like that. Dinner was simple but full of warmth. The kids told stories, Ruth joined us with her usual dry humor, and for the first time, laughter felt safe again. After the meal, Tyler climbed onto my lap. Grandma, are you coming back home soon? I smoothed his hair gently. No, sweetheart. This is my home now. But you can visit anytime you want. We'll have our own adventures here. He thought about it for a moment, then grinned. Can we bake your apple pie? Of course, I said, smiling. Later that night, when the children were asleep on the couch, Derek and I stood on the balcony overlooking the quiet street. The city lights shimmered softly in the distance. You seem happy, Mom, he said quietly. I am, I replied. Happiness doesn't always mean everything is perfect. Sometimes it just means knowing your worth. He nodded slowly. I'm learning that. Amber too. We've both changed. I can see that, I said. You're trying, and that matters. He hesitated. Do you think you'll ever forgive us? I already have, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. It means moving forward without bitterness. Derek looked down, tears shining in his eyes. Thank you for not giving up on me. I didn't stop loving you, I said softly. I just started loving myself too. He smiled through his tears. You've always been the strongest person I know. Not strong, I corrected gently. Just tired of being small. We stood there for a while, the silence between us finally peaceful. When they left the next morning, Mia hugged me tight and whispered, "We love you, Grandma." "I love you too, my heart," I whispered back. As their car disappeared around the corner, I turned to see Frank walking toward the bookstore with 2 coffees in hand. He smiled, holding one out to me. "Morning, Vivian. You ready to open up?" I took the cup and smiled back. "Yes, I think I finally am." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the bookstore windows. I stood by the counter, listening to the soft rustle of pages as Ruth arranged new arrivals. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the corner where Frank sat reading. For the first time in years, I felt steady, not waiting for anyone's approval, not shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. I had become my own home. People often think peace comes from fixing what's broken. I used to believe that too. I tried to fix everything: my son's distance, Amber's indifference, the silence that filled that house. But peace doesn't come from patching holes in someone else's roof. It comes from building your own shelter and standing tall beneath it. Every day in Seattle felt like a small reminder that life wasn't over just because one chapter ended. I had lost my husband, my home, and the illusion of being needed, but I had found something far greater: the truth that love without respect is only decoration, and kindness without boundaries turns into servitude. Ruth and I grew close again, stronger than we had ever been. We laughed about things that once divided us. We spent quiet evenings sipping tea, talking about our mother, about Robert, about forgiveness. Frank became part of that rhythm, patient, steady, never asking for more than friendship. We spent weekends exploring markets, visiting art fairs, and sitting by the pier watching ferries glide across the water. He never tried to fill a space that belonged to someone else, he simply created one beside me. Sometimes Derek called in the evenings, updating me on the children's school projects or sharing photos of the family dog they'd named Vivi. Each call was gentle, respectful, the tone of a son who finally understood that love is not a one-way transaction. One evening, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I realized something that took me nearly 7 decades to learn. People don't truly forget how to love, they forget how to listen. And when you stop being heard, you must stop whispering and start walking. That's what I did. I walked away. Not to punish, but to heal. I used to think silence meant defeat. Now I know silence can be a declaration, a message that says, I will no longer explain why I deserve kindness. If there's one lesson I want every woman watching this to take with her, it's this: you teach people how to treat you. And if they refuse to learn, you teach yourself how to leave. Walking away doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you finally started caring about yourself. So if you're watching this and holding on to a situation that drains your joy, I want you to remember my story. You can rebuild. You can begin again. You can write a new chapter that belongs entirely to you. Because respect isn't a gift someone gives you, it's a standard you set for yourself. And once you learn that truth, you'll never settle for leftovers again. If Vivian's story touched your heart, click like to support more stories of strength and renewal. Subscribe to this channel for new stories every day that remind us, life's lessons don't come from comfort, they come from courage. And tell us in the comments, what did this story teach you about love, respect, and self-worth?